Welcome to another episode of the brand called You, a video and podcast show that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Today, it is my privilege to welcome someone who's decided to pursue her passion, Ujala Choudhary. Ujala, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here, Ashutosh. It's an honor. Thank you.
Ujala was a city banker for many years and then decided she'd had enough of the bank and she decided to join the Navjyoti India Foundation, and she's an executive director with the foundation now. Ujala, tell me a little bit about what you would say are three key milestones in your career or life.
Sure. So I started pretty early in my career, Ashutosh, and I had a good opportunity to work with a beautiful and a very interesting institution like Citigroup, Citibank. So I consider myself really fortunate. I got to learn so much, so many products, under one umbrella. So that was a beautiful part of Citi. I learned a lot. Having said that, I also was taking trainings for the new hires and coordinating the trainings for the bankers.
Mhm.
And then the compliances bit allowed me to really get into the depth
Mhm.
and understand the systems in much more detail. And then while I was on my maternity leave from work, I
Mhm.
decided to go to I met Dr. Kiran Bedi, who's
Mhm.
our leader, of course, and I decided to just volunteer and be there, in one of our centers of
Mhm.
Navjyoti India Foundation.
Mhm.
So my sister was already working there, but I
Okay.
never was really interested in what was happening because I was into a very different world altogether.
Right.
Having said that, I worked in the villages for almost 5 years. I
Mhm.
worked with them, worked in one of the, rigid communities of Sohna block in Haryana.
Mhm.
And then post which I was asked to take care or mobilize resources for the organization. So it's been a beautiful 12 years journey with Navjyoti and almost a decade with Citigroup. Well, about the milestones in my career on a personal front, I would say transition from a stable corporate to the social sector involved a lot of work and lifestyle changes, confronting challenging situations, far from comfortable corporate job,
Right.
managing finances and undertaking some multiple responsibilities with limited resources. So
Mhm.
transition, Ashutosh, was not very easy, but it involved considerable amount of unlearning, relearning, and self-discovery. Well, on the professional front, I personally feel that a lot of people look on a career milestones that carry external recognition like promotions and titles,
Mhm.
etc. But if you aren't really happy on the inside, to me, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
But if I talk about, it's very important to be working in a workplace wherein a lot of people they support you and you really achieve your potential to the fullest. So if I talk about a milestone, of course, you cannot really achieve without the teamwork. But
Mhm.
again, I'm really gratitude to my team that I would really consider that we have been able to revive a lot of ponds in our community in Sona block. So,
Mhm.
as we know that water bodies are a lifeline, so it is our duty to protect them.
Mhm.
And we have been able to revive a lot of ponds in those communities so that, the vested interest of some muscle men or,
Mhm.
some council heads uh, uh, do not allow them to deplete our rich resources. So I think that's one of them. Secondly, Ashutosh, we as an organization of Jyoti India Foundation, we believe in self-reliance, towards self-reliance. That's our motto. We
Mhm.
personally do not believe that, we just have to distribute stuff, of course, unless there is a calamity and you have to help them.
Mhm.
But our motto is towards self-reliance. So we were working with about almost 2,000 women directly.
Mhm.
And we were into microcredit programs, not microfinance, but microcredit programs.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have been able to empower almost all of them. But one such example, which I would want to share on this platform, is there's this lady by the name of Nirmala who lost her husband pretty early with, just leaving behind two kids. And, we are into self help groups, microcredit model. And this woman, so beautifully, we linked her to the Grameen Bank, and so beautifully, she was able to open a boutique in her village. On record, she came back and she said that she started earning a lakh per month,
Wow.
you know. and she was not able to, it's not only, so it's not that you're empowering women alone, you're empowering the entire community. Her children today are grown up and they are pursuing their masters in business administration in Chandigarh. Not only that, she is now employing a lot of other women in the
Yes.
villages. So you're not only empowering these women, they have been able to empower so many in the villages who need help. So to me, I think
No,
this is,
this is quite incredible because as you were talking, I was I was taken back to many years ago, in when I happened to have an opportunity to meet Professor Mohammed Yunus of Grameen.
wow, yeah, okay,
And
yes.
I asked him this one question, that you giving out so much money to so many women, is it safe? And he said it is safer than any other loan any bank can give. Is
Oh,
that your
absolutely.
experience also?
Yes, absolutely. The default rate is, I must share with you,
Mm.
is in our, at least in our model with Navjyoti, the self-help group, the default rate is just zilch.
Okay,
Yeah, so it's beautiful. It's a beautiful model.
I agree with you. So, you spoke about water bodies, you spoke about the self-help group. What are the other scope of activities of the Navjyoti India Foundation?
Sure. So ours is a 32-year-old organization, Ashutosh, and we started with it all started when Dr. Kiran Bedi. So the founder member is Dr. Kiran
Yeah.
Bedi. It all started when she was already a police officer in the Northwest Delhi. Now, this is what she has taught us, that always get into the root cause of the problem.
Mm.
So the crime rate in her area was very, very high, and she wanted to understand what is the reason behind it. And then we figured out that it was due to the nexus, the drug addicts and etc. It was a huge nexus, and the children and everybody was really, they were really getting into this uh, into these problems.
Correct.
So rather than putting these peddlers and addicts behind bar, Dr. Bedi, in her own police garage,
Mm.
she opened a drug rehabilitation center. That's how Navjyoti was born.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
we are very clear on one thing, Ashutosh. We do not want to do something which is parallel to what the government is already doing. We
Mm.
would rather complement them, or, do something which they aren't able to do.
Mm.
So then, rather than opening the government schools which existed already in the nearby areas,
Mm.
we entered into remedial education centers.
Mm.
It's like the school ke baad school
Mm.
program. So first of all, we motivated the children to go to the schools so that they do not drop out, because the dropout rate in our country is pretty high. So
Correct.
they do not drop out. We ensure that they come to our remedial education centers and they learn. So it's an integrated model. So having said that, we're into child education program, we're into skill upgradation programs, we're into women empowerment, we're into environment programs, trying to reserve the water bodies, etc. A lot of people ask us that why are you into so many things? Why it's
Mm.
not a very focused approach?
Mm.
But we've also realized that once you're working in the community, you really cannot work in isolation. If
Correct.
today I wish to empower women and they have to go to far off places to fetch water, and I'm not really taking care of those problems which exist, then
Mm.
it's a very superficial change which you're trying to make. So it has to have an integrated approach, Ashutosh.
Well said.
So these are few of the programs that we
Wonderful.
are into.
So when I was reading about you, you also said that the foundation, or you, I think, challenged the status quo. Give me an example.
Sure. So, Ashutosh, I've come to this conclusion that when you're working in the field, it undergoes a dramatic transformation.
Mm.
So instead of making those superficial changes, that have a short-term impact, it is very important and critical to look into the programs that will make the changes and will allow the organization, to thrive in the future.
Mhm.
So one such example was, there was a myth that, if you are in a social sector, then, you should be working in the villages or the areas
Mm.
wherein the community is with you.
Mm.
The community or the council head or the so-called sarpanches should be with you all the time. You shouldn't be working in a very rigid mindset. Otherwise, the programs or the projects would fail.
Correct.
So one fine day, I was in my office. I just recently joined Navjyoti, and there were these 3 to 4 sarpanches who enter my
Mm.
office, and they told me that we do know that you're doing a lot of work with the communities. and just make sure that this should not happen. We know what all is happening. They pretty much knew almost everything about where I was coming from. And, I had a small kid at home. I used to come in a small red Santro. They knew everything about me. So they were, in a way, trying to threaten me that stop doing this work.
Wow.
But I think we took it as a challenge. We took it as a challenge. We said no. So a lot of people came back. My own team members came back, and they, at one point of time, said that let's move on to the other project, because we were trying to empower a lot of women in those
Mhm.
areas. So we said no. We will work in the same village. We will learn as to why did this happen. It taught me that you have to have an integrated approach.
Mm.
You cannot work in isolation. We have to understand that why would they not allow us to be in that village.
Mm.
And Ashutosh, we planned it in such a way, our programs. It was one of the village in Sona block that, the entire planning and the execution, everything happened while
Mm.
being with them, the
Mm.
same sarpanches.
Mm.
We cannot isolate ourselves from the fact that, after all, it's the same people of the villages who elected them.
Mm.
And would you believe, we changed our approach, we changed our strategy. The same sarpanch became the brand ambassador of our work to the
Mm.
rest of the world. So I
Fantastic.
think I do not want to believe that because there is a myth that, you should always work in an area where the community is always supportive, etc. Why? I mean, then it's a very superficial
Mm.
change that you're trying to make.
Mm.
Why can't we take them along and make the same community be with us?
Mm.
And like a force, we kind of try to make a long-term impact.
Very nice. So, you are also an expert in raising funds. I know that seems to be the bane of most NGOs in the social sector. What is it that you are able to do differently where you can ask people to be able to give more?
Ashutosh, raising money can be very challenging as well as
Really?
a very creative work, I would say that.
Mm.
Especially, with the ever-changing market trends, the priorities of the people, they change,
Mm.
you know. They change, of course, not only people, but also the corporates per se. So you have to be on your toes all the time. You
Mm.
have to be creative all the time.
Mm.
And the best thing which has worked with us is that you have to be extremely transparent with
Mm.
the people or your custodians or the well-wishers who are paying you. After all, it's their hard-earned money. So,
Correct.
we make sure that the communication is the key. So
Mm.
we make sure that from time to time, we involve them in the activities, we engage them in the activities,
Mm.
we update them constantly as to, what's happening with
Mm.
their money. Apart from that, I also feel that India by nature, I mean, it's a very generous country. There is
Mm.
no dearth of money in our country as well.
Correct.
Especially when I go outside India and I try to generate resources, a lot of people or NRIs, they come back to me, they say, is there any dearth of funds in India that you have come that far to generate resources? So
Yes.
I tell them there is no dearth. However, it's also about priorities,
Correct.
Ashutosh. Like, I was reading a report from CAF, which got
Mm.
published a couple of months ago, and it said about 55% of, the money had gone, people have donated to some religious institutions. So that's their priorities. But, the challenge is that, how do you see here? You do not have any product, Ashutosh.
Mm.
I do not have a product to sell when I go
Correct.
out and I ask for
Yeah.
money. But, you have to keep challenging yourself, and you have to present such stories and tell them that how empowering these communities would sustain this program forever.
Wonderful.
So something like that. So
Fantastic.
yeah, it's interesting. It's challenging, but very, very creative.
Well
You
done.
have to be
Well,
very creative all the time.
well done. So, again, you have something called a Jagrit Nari Foundation. Tell me
Right.
about this one.
So Ashutosh, Jagrit Nari Federation was formed in the year 10 years ago. 10
Mm.
years ago in the month of June.
Right.
And we were already working in some 45 villages in
Mm.
Sona block.
Mm.
And, we were a team of about 10 to 12 people.
Mhm.
It was not possible that these 10 people, they reach out to so many women. But we were already working with about 2,000 women. So
Wow.
there we realized that it was important to create a platform and we register a body of these women
Mm,
And we named it, rather, they were the ones, the women only called themselves, they named it themselves like a Jagrat Nari Federation.
mm,
And it was very important to create this. We registered this body so that if so the whole objective behind this was that once we have this body, let the federation work like us, and they take on the activities as to what all we have been doing all this while, so that we can then move on to other villages and we can have a better similar impact,
okay.
the way we've been doing on all this while with these women. Jagrit Nari Federation is a proper registered body wherein they have their own board members, they have their own elections, and they have done some beautiful work like the roads which were not constructed for the last 30 years. The women, they have all come together
Mm,
and, they filed RTIs and the roads are all there. If there were no, illegal liquor shops which are there in these villages, again, the federation, they've come together along with other people and
mm,
they've been able to demolish that.
very
So
nice.
I think, and the president of the federation who belongs to the same, of course, village was also awarded
Mm,
by World Women's Summit Foundation. And I think it's wonderful. It motivates, they become the brand ambassador to the rest of the women in the
mm,
community. And I think it's fantastic because there are other women who are now coming up and telling us that we wish to do a similar work. So who better than them as brand ambassadors, Ashish?
fantastic. So I've
So
got
this
one more
is a
question
bit
for
about
you
them.
about relating to Navjyoti before I move to the next part, which are some personal questions. This is the age of the millennials and the Gen Zs. Everyone who's coming into the workforce, so to speak. How are they?
Yeah.
How are they changing the face of the social sector?
Sure. So, my experience has been
Mm-hmm.
that they resonate with stories.
Mm-hmm.
Authenticity is Authenticity is what really matters to them when it comes to charitable giving.
Mm-hmm.
They wish to know, they want to know the stories of who they are helping. They wish transparency is very, very critical to them. They are really coming forward and helping the organizations, whether through volunteerism or promoting the cause, etc. Or maybe they themselves coming forward and helping these NGOs and organizations. However, they want to know where the money is going, where the rupee is going, how is it being used. This is closely associated with, the authenticity and results, Ashutosh. They're very smart. They're
Mm-hmm.
really, really smart. They need to know. It doesn't matter that, they won't trust an organization simply because you have a solid foundation or you're talking a lot about it. They want to be more engrossed in it. And then once they are convinced that it's a noble cause and they resonate with the stories, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
they're just out there to help you. So that's a very encouraging,
Fantastic.
which is coming up now. That's my experience with Gen
Wonderful.
Z and millennials.
So let me move to a few questions for you personally now.
Mhm.
My first question is that the kind of work that you are doing, away from the corporate world in a new world that you have created in Navjyoti. Where do you draw your inspiration from?
Well, I read a lot. I do read a lot, but to be very honest, the way we are moving, and a lot of people ask us that what does success mean to you? What does success mean to us? It means achieving your goals and constantly learning every day.
Mm,
So, the moment you feel that now there is a time to explore something new, you move on and you are out there to learn something new and make a deeper impact.
mm,
If you ask me, I'll be very candid and honest with you. I draw my inspiration away from the screen.
okay.
That's the time when I am myself and I contemplate and I talk to myself. I look at my goals, short term, mid term, and long term goals. But I think my mind works the best, and I draw my inspiration away from the screen for a while. I make sure that every day, at least for half an hour, I am out for my walks because that's the best time when I think I contemplate and introspect a lot of things, what I wish to do and learn in life.
So that leads me to a follow-up question. How do you set your personal and professional goals?
Wow. I do believe in smart goals.
Mm,
It has to be, I do believe in that. And I think it has to be, of course, specific, measurable, time bound, and attainable, and I pen it down, and so that it gets me to the feeling of having very tangible goals. And I try to plan it well, and I execute it and work towards it.
And what would you say is the most exciting and challenging part of your work?
My work. See, the beauty of my work is that I see haves and have-nots. I have been and worked very closely in the villages for almost 5 years. So I know the needs of them. When I interact with the haves and the so-called people who have a lot of resources, I think I'm able to. So the challenge is, how do you really bridge the gap? How do you bridge the gap? So that's the challenge. If I'm able to do that, if I'm able to connect the dots, then I think it works beautifully in my current role. But having said that, I feel the biggest challenge is there is no product for me to sell. So it is very important. And as I said earlier, the priorities of people are different. So how do you really make them understand that why is it important to sustain and make them sustain the programs and make them independent, so that eventually they can not only take care of their families, Ashutosh, but they can take care of the communities. As I told you, the case of Nirmala ji, who is now employing the women, the needy women from the communities.
Yes.
So there's no product here. I just have to ensure that I try to bridge the gap between the haves and have-nots.
So I have time for one more question for you. And this question is that, if you, Ujala, were a role model to millions of children who closely followed your life choices, what is the one thing you would change in yourself?
Many, but one is that I'm very impatient.
Okay.
It leads to reaction. I that shouldn't be there. So at times I think I tend to really overreact because I am very impatient. It should be the other way around. It should be that you should be able to respond than being reactive. So that is something which I feel I would want to change.
That's amazing. Ujala, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure speaking to you. I wish you and Navjyoti lots of success.
Thank you very much. It's my honor to be on your show. Thank you, Ashutosh.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the brand called You Videocast and Podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.